Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today I want to share with you some of my worst books of 2022. So I read several books this year that I didn't like, but when I do videos like this at the end of the year, I just tend to take the books that got the strongest negative reaction out of me, not necessarily just every book that I didn't particularly enjoy. So I do like to make that distinction with videos like this. But I have 6 books to share with you in this video. We're gonna go in the order that I read them in throughout the year. They're not ranked in any way. So I do hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it. So the first book that's making this list is All You Need Is Kill by Hiroshi Sakurazaka, and this is an action military style sci-fi novel. And I think a lot of my dislike for this book is primarily just due to time. I read this back in February and I didn't like it when I finished it, but I think it sat with me all year at this point. But I think if I had read this book just even a little bit later, maybe even as late as June, it probably wouldn't make this list, but here we are. So All You Need Is Kill has a time loop structure to it, and we're following our main character who is a soldier, and he has been trained to fight against these invaders known as mimics. And pretty early on in the book, I've gotten rid of all of my copies of these books except for one because it's one of the last ones that I read that's making this list. So I can't reference this, but I think like on page 3 he dies in battle. So that's not a spoiler, it happens very quickly. He dies in battle, and so our main character, he wakes up like 24 hours before the battle, and so we're going through his day with him as he's preparing, and he's just like, you know, what's going on? Everything's strange because he still has his memories from the battle, and the same thing keeps happening. He dies, he wakes up a day before, he goes through the motions, and things are always just a little bit different each time. We do have another character who is introduced into the story a little bit later who kind of acts as a disruption to that time loop flow, and we go from there. My biggest issue with this book is unfortunately the humor, and it's not humorous like in a Murderbot Diaries, Martian kind of way. Instead, the book has kind of that locker room humor, and it just really does not work for me in this book. I've read it in some books where it does work. It fits the style of the story, it fits the characters who are making these jokes, but in this book it just feels like overused, unnecessary, cringy, crude humor. And after a while it did kind of start getting a few eye rolls out of me. And then we're in the main character's head, so we're very close with his personal thoughts and some of the things he's thinking. I'm just like, I really don't care. And my other big issue with this book is I think a lot of it just loses total steam after we start learning a little bit more about the mimics and where they came from, and start learning a little bit more about what is actually going on with this time loop. There's still maybe about 70-ish pages left after all of that happens, and I feel like after that all the momentum is gone. My intrigue with this time loop structure is not as strong as it was in the beginning, so it just felt a little bit flat for me as we started getting into the later half of this book. And the book isn't even that long, but after we learned about that history, I just wasn't as invested anymore. So overall, this wasn't for me, and it is a case where I would actually recommend you go watch the adaptation, The Edge of Tomorrow, and don't read this. So the next book making this list is Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. This book I think is the perfect example of a book that has a really strong, really amazing premise, but a very weak execution. So in this book we have this crew, and they're on this very icy, inhospitable planet that they're trying to terraform. And we also have our main character, Mickey, who is brought on this expedition as an expendable. So as they're going out on these different survey missions and getting to know this planet, if something is too dangerous, they will send Mickey out because, you know, if something happens to him, they can just create another Mickey. So he goes out, he dies, and the same thing keeps happening over and over. And so by the time the book actually starts, we are introduced to Mickey 7. So this has already happened several times. And so with Mickey 7, he also starts in this dangerous, life-threatening situation, and he's presumed dead by the rest of the crew, but he's not dead, and he makes it back to his base, and it's there that he finds that they've already created another Mickey. So now we have Mickey 8 and Mickey 7, and the two of them cannot exist at the same time. So in this book, I really enjoyed the world building elements, the sci-fi elements of this, but overall I found Mickey as a character to just be very bland, very forgettable, and now there's 2 of him, so it's like double the blandness and double the forgettableness. And there's also this really weird romance subplot that just did absolutely nothing for me. I wasn't a fan of that at all. And I think with this book, the premise of it sets the story up to be a lot more, I don't know if serious is the right word, but it sets it up to be a lot more serious than it actually is. But by the time we meet Mickey 8, it just all feels very cheesy instead. And you know, we have all of this great world building out there. We have all this tension as these characters are trying to navigate this dangerous planet as they're trying to survive and supplies are running low. So you have so many great story building blocks, but instead of focusing more on that, we get these conversations between these two Mickeys, and some of the humor in it reminds me of less funny version of Andy Weir's books. I really was not a fan of that. And I think for that reason, this book has stuck with me for all the wrong reasons. So I do think this is the most unfortunate one for me, because I really did want to like this book. Again, the premise of it is just amazing, but overall I just don't think the characters and the execution was strong enough to sustain that amazing premise. So the next book making this list is Book of Night by Holly Black. No surprise here. I feel like months later I still struggle with how to actually talk about this book, how to actually describe this book. Of all the books that I didn't enjoy this year, even the ones not on this list and the ones that are on this list, Book of Night is the most unpleasant reading experience I had in 2022. And just the last 70-ish pages of this book is some of the most convoluted writing, storytelling, plot movement, I don't know what you call it. It's some of the most convoluted stuff that I can recall that I've ever read. With this book, for me, there was just nothing to latch on to overall. I wasn't a fan of Charlie. I wasn't a fan of the magic. I wasn't a fan of the flow of the story. There was just... This book is a lot. So in this, we are following our main character, Charlie Hall, and it's set in this world where certain individuals who are called glow mists can control, they can manipulate and alter shadows. You would think that sounds so cool, right? Wrong. It's not cool, because we don't see it. I feel like this book suffers from a serious case of telling and not showing. It's like at some point I'm gonna need to see this magic in action. I'm gonna need to see how characters react to the magic, how they can use this magic. And there's so much build up. There's almost feels like hand holding in some places. There's so much build up. There's so much talking about this shadow magic and the glow mist and things like that. So by the time you do finally see things in action, it feels like it's not the same thing that we have been learning about all this time throughout the book thus far. And I mean, I know Charlie is she's this hardened character. She's been through a lot. She's seen some things because she is very familiar with this shadow world and glow mist and things like that and how everything works. But she comes off as very unfeeling. It's like, as the reader, if Charlie doesn't care about these things that are happening, or it doesn't show any kind of response to them, why should I care? And because of that, it just feels like things are happening for the sake of happening. It feels like things are happening to Charlie, but not because she's really setting anything in motion. At the end of the day, I'm just like, where is the intrigue? Where is the hook? I feel like this book was missing so much. It was missing all of that. But to top it all off, there is a mystery element to this story, and the mystery gets so messy and so muddled because it gets lost in the magic, because the magic doesn't make sense. I think this is the last time on this channel that I will mention Book of Night. I don't tend to keep talking about books I don't like anyway, but this book in particular just really frustrates me to talk about. So I am not a fan of Book of Night. I will not be reading the second book in this duology series, trilogy, whatever it's going to be. Yeah, this was a major disappointment in 2022. The next book that's making this list is Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. I need to take a moment before I talk about this book. This book is another one that really frustrates me. This is a thriller. I was actually really enjoying this book for the first half, and then, you know, like all thrillers, we start getting some answers. And when those answers started coming out, it really ruined the entire book for me. I mean, just completely wiped out all the entertainment, all the enjoyment I was getting being wrapped up in this mystery. I mean, from page one, I was just like, this is it. This is what we're going with. And when we start getting to that point where we are getting answers and things are falling into place, it's so layered, and each layer just feels a little bit more ridiculous than the last. In this book, we're following our main character, Mallory, and she is a recovering addict, and she is hired to be the live-in babysitter for this couple and their young son, Teddy. And pretty soon, Mallory realizes that Teddy is drawing these just really creepy, disturbing pictures. And as the book goes on, the pictures get more detailed. I wish I had the book so I could show pictures of it. That was actually a really cool part of the story that I was enjoying. And every time a new picture would pop up on the page, I'm like, oh, let me cover this up. I don't want to look at that while I'm reading this page. It was, yeah, some of the pictures are very unsettling. And so Mallory, she gets very wrapped up in that mystery of you know, what is this? Who are these people in these pictures? What are you drawing? What's going on here? And that mystery of what is going on carries throughout the first half of, actually a little bit past the first half of this book. And that part is so good. I mean, I was hooked. I was like, this child is creepy. I was here for it, and I was really invested in this story. And then you guys, it just all went downhill after that for me. When it comes to thrillers, or you know, when it comes to really any book, I am a very easygoing, very go with the flow kind of reader. I'm not sitting up trying to figure anything out. I'm not looking for clues like that. I'm not trying to put puzzle pieces together and, you know, draw little lines and like, oh, what's going on here? Are they connected? I can also suspend disbelief very well. When I pick up a book, I am leaving it in the author's hands to take me where you're going to take me, and we'll see where this goes kind of thing. But I'm not like overly like, oh, what's going on here? Or, oh, I think it's, I'm not doing all that. But there is something about hidden pictures in particular that bothers me on like a logistical level. I've said this before. There is no way, and again, I can suspend disbelief very, very well. I'm looking at you, Finley Donovan. I enjoy Finley Donovan, by the way, but there is no way Mallory is a 24/7 live-in babysitter and is as clueless as she is. I don't buy that. I really, really don't. And for me, that is why these answers that we get just don't make sense. They don't add up. Just even the climax itself, I didn't like it. Forget Mallory for a second. The actual climax of the story, like all the answers, I don't like them. Let's just leave it at that. I don't like it. The next book making this list is Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford. This book, I've mentioned this book a couple of times already. I mentioned it in a wrap-up, and then I think it was also in my video about like series I'm not going to be finishing, but I don't think I really conveyed how much I don't like Engines of Empire. This is a book where at the end of the day, I just could not care less about any of these characters. It's 5 different POVs, 4 from our main family that we're following, and we get another a little bit later on, but we're not going to go into that POV. And there's nothing there. There's nothing, I didn't find anything there for me to latch on to with these characters. This is set in a world that is run by guilds, and so we have different guilds for different aspects of society. We have administration guilds and other things, and so that was very descriptive, I know. But our main family who we're following, they are the Hawkspurs, and the Hawkspur Guild is in charge of transportation across the entire empire. And so we have our 4 main POVs. We have Rosamund, who's the matriarch of the family and the head of the guild, and then we have her 3 adult children. We have, I don't remember their names like that. I think Connell, Tyretta, and Fulren are the other main perspectives, and we just cycle through them throughout the whole book. And these characters are some of the least interesting characters I've read, I think, this year. I've mentioned this before. My biggest complaint actually is with Rosamund. I don't know. There's something about her that I just was so frustrated with throughout most of this book, because she is the head of this family. She is the leader of one of the most powerful guilds in this world. And I've mentioned this before. She does not feel like that. She is not. We're told that she's really powerful, and we're told this guild is so important and things like that, but she doesn't read like that. And at the beginning of the book, Rosamund like reprimanded her daughter, and I'm like, ma'am, you're not so hot yourself either. First of all, I don't really know how to explain this, but as I was reading this book, Rosamund feels like, I'm not saying this is intentional like at all, but Rosamund almost feels like the writer wants her to be a female character in like the Game of Thrones universe, and it doesn't work. There's just something about her that doesn't feel powerful or authoritative or like a power player. And the thing is, she's so accustomed to this world to not be able to maneuver through it. Aside from the characters and my dislike for the characters, especially the youngest son, Fulren, well, I don't even want to get into him, but aside from the characters, I was so frustrated by this world. The world of Engines of Empire is actually amazing. I mean, we have a society run by guilds. You can tell there's a lot of political maneuverings happening in the capital. There are power plays being made between the more religious orders in this world and trying to challenge the power of the guilds. And so there's so much great setup and great world building, and just the way that the guilds work is really fascinating. So I loved all of those aspects of the story, but I feel like we don't really get to even see those aspects of the story that much, because the characters are all in separate places. They're all in different pockets of this world trying to do their own things, but even within their own corners of the world, they're like in very specific, very closed in type of places. And I don't know, reading this, it just feels like there's this great world out there and we're hearing so much about it and we can see things look nice, but it's like RS4 wants to just keep us shut in the house. I want to go outside. I want to see things. How do the guilds really interact with each other? How does this world really work, like on a ground level? I want to see more interaction in the capital. I want to see, just get me outside. Get me out of these castle walls. Get me out of this little forest. Like, it's like right there. And I just couldn't get to it. So that's my biggest frustration with Engines of Empire. And just overall, this was a pretty unsatisfying reading experience. And then finally, the last book that is making this list is more of a recent read for me, and that is Ruination by Anthony Reynolds. And this is an adult fantasy novel, and it's also a book that is set in the League. It's a League of Legends novel, so it's set in the League of Legends universe. But what I will say, I do appreciate the fact with this book that you don't have to be a fan of, you know, League to get into this book, to understand what's going on. It reads like just like a normal fantasy novel. With Ruination, I spent a good majority of this book not really feeling anything. I was very indifferent to a lot going on in this book. The book wasn't bad where I thought, you know, I should put this down, but it wasn't intriguing enough where I should have continued on for as long as I did and then eventually finished the book. So I read the first half. It's just kind of like with a straight face, like, okay, whatever, flipping pages. But by the end of it, yeah, I was annoyed. I think for me with Ruination, this book was just missing something, some oomph, some pizzazz. I don't know. This is the best way I can describe this book is that it feels very, very safe. What you see on the description is what you get. We hit all of the key like plot points when we're supposed to, and it's like, oh, there's the climax, and oh, there's the aftermath of that. And characters throughout this do things that are expected of them. I'll put it like that. And it almost feels like they're the extreme caricatures of very specific tropes that they're meant to represent in this book, whether that's the Mad King or like the loyal and capable soldier and right hand to the king. And then of course you have like the very obvious villains in the story. So I think this book does what's expected of it, but I think that's where my dislike and even frustration with it comes in, because nothing really stands out to me. It's like being on a roller coaster that doesn't go up, down, loop around. It just started at the station straight ahead and then you end up back at the station. We have our main character Callista in this, and she comes from this powerful family, but she went more so the route of the warrior, the soldier, and so she's this very capable fighter, commander, but she provides more like counsel to her uncle, who's more like a brother to her, who recently took his place on the throne. And so the story really gets into motion when the king's wife is hurt in, you know, during this dinner, and from there Callista is sent into the world to go find help. And we also have this mythical place that could hold the answers. I think Ruination might be the most interesting addition to this list just because it's fine. It really is fine, but I think my personal dislike for it comes in the fact that it is a very much what you see is what you get kind of story, and it didn't do anything for me. It didn't move me in any way. It didn't surprise me in any way. It very much stuck to its own course and planned path, and just nothing else of excitement was really happening in this story. So I think more than anything, this one just gets a really strong like annoyance out of me than something like the other books on this list. Unfortunately, not for me. I don't know if this is going to continue on. I don't see anything on Goodreads that says it's going to be a next book coming. The way it ended, I could totally see it being a second book, a series, trilogy, whatever. But if it is something that comes after Ruination, I will not be reading it. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments what are some of your least favorite books of the year, your worst books of the year. I want to hear about it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.